So we're last night we did the specific Willow song, the guide for the town. This is more of a regional guide. Unlike last night, I don't believe I'm going to try reading all the way through this. Instead, I'm just going to try and get a feel for the different specific options the guide last night was recommending. Chapter 1, Introduction. I did preview this map because, well, at a first glance, it was quite hard for me to actually find the region we were in, which it's described as particularly rural, but to me, this is also a map from, I believe, in universe 100 or so years later, so I suppose it won't match up quite, but this region seems really, we've got these large mountain ranges and vast swaths of untamed wilderness, but the region we're in is right in here, which I don't remember. Well, I mean, it has to be south. And then I think the fortress it mentioned must be on the east there. But Z is the nearest town, and like the details that we were looking at last night really don't even make it on the map. But yeah, so the specific area that we're looking at, what we're looking at last night was in the Spectre Wood and within this sort of oblong country, Shenmen, which seems to, just at a glance, not be of any particular prominence, which is probably why it was getting taken over in the storyline that we were looking at. Despite frequent appellations by Avistani scholars as the Dragon Empire's Tian Xia is much more than a land of dragons and emperors. While draconic machinations and imperial ambitions have indeed hewn momentous paths, no worm or potentate can truly speak for or lay claim to the continent's monumental entirety. Tian Xia is vast, and its wonders are manifold. No singular class of being, no matter how powerful, can hold it comfortably within one destiny, horizon, or definition. The quintessential Tian Xia instead resides within its peoples and places. For over 10,000 years, these vistas have witnessed untold numbers of aspirations, labors, and tragedies. Myriad climates and environs sprung from these lands and waters, upon which the countless ecologies and societies trace tangled contours. The pulse of passage of so many lives echo within Tian Xia's soul. The azure-shadowed peaks and sand-dancing gorges enfold its people's dreams and celebrations, even as the boundless waves and monsoon-whistling islands embrace their remembrances and lamentations. Witness Tian Xia, where the quotidian rhythms of communities and habitats speak on even terms with desires and excesses of sovereigns and dragons. With patience and presence, the polyphonies of Tian Xia's histories, the transformation shall ring more clearly, and its truths become human to experience and behold. Regions of Tian Xia. While the 16 successor states comprised of the former provinces of Imperial Lunghua greatly influenced contemporary Tian geopolitics, it would be remiss to ignore those independent lands beyond the empire's grasp. Dynastic superpowers, faded or resurgent, have shaped many Tian societies, ideals, and habitats, from language and custom to law and commerce. However, such conceptions and folkways are neither all encompassing nor necessarily indicative of imperial identities or loyalties. After all, the people of the peripheries, Tianxia's ungovernable highlands, remote jungles, coastal peninsulas, and open seas care little for the heartland's dynastic claims, and they worry even less whether those dynasties are named Lung, Shu, or Yixing. While interruptions of imperial power might variably profit or inconvenience regimes in these so-called outskirts and enable or deny those regional elites access to metropolitan wealth and prestige, an empire is hardly necessary for these independent existences to function and flourish. Few fathom the wall of heaven, that aloof massive mountain range, as anything more than a barrier of Tianxia's western coast, yet it contains histories and mysteries threaded through with tempest and shadow. Tianyai explorers have leave the relative safety of foothills and ridges to seek Yijai, the legendary flying city, while deep within these heaven-piercing peaks, Shori aeromancers and Oni warlords carry out a secret extra-planar war. Lingua emperors also consider the nearby Shangguang Desert a nominal part of the empire, but its courts and cartographers consider its deserts as empty of value. Beyond these official reckonings, those shining sands host wondrous marvels, where Mutabiki nomads tend to thousand-year oases of flower and fruit and compose thankful ballads for the mercies of benevolent kaiju. In northernmost Tianxia, near the crown of the world, stretch the endless skies and steppes of azure gold, Hongal. While many know of Hongal as the terminus of the path of Agenhe connecting Tianxia with Avistan, the indigenous Tianla horse lords and herders trace their own paths amid the ever-shifting winds, mustering the mettle and wit to face fiendish adversaries and commercial opportunities alike. The path of Agenhe wends eastward through the primeval forest of spirits, where mighty kami watch over the woods, ancient soil and deep drinking roots. This sacred land swells with numinous power, drawing spirits and peoples who revere nature into the embrace of its green canopies. Together they resist depredations and impositions of industrialists and warlords. The path of Egenhe dips south into Minkai, a fiercely independent empire once poised to replace fallen Longhua as Tianxia's most powerful empire. Riven between contradictory demands of modernity and tradition, and scarred by Oni manipulators, the land now undergoes reformation under its unconventional empress. The southern lands also challenge those accounts that emphasize the centrality and significance of Tianshu or Tianmin polities on the continent. Thanks to the Emerald Ocean's proximity, the South exhibits a preponderance of Khazmar influence and interaction. Vidrani names or Kelishite architecture are widespread, while the well-regarded teachings of Iro Shu were popularized by missionaries and pilgrims from Sumatra off East Vidra. Such cultural flows aren't one way. While some scholars claim Nalinvati worship is a Vudran religion brought over to Tian Xia via the Darklands, Nagahor's Nagaji stridently oppose this claim, citing their homelands as the source of this faith. Their ancestors to be the transmitters of these teachings to Vudra and beyond. Nagajor shares a southeastern border with Xia Hoi, perhaps the most exemplary form of a dragon empire, for it's a nation bound in fealty to sovereign dragons, and both nations also share security interests in repelling the hostile incursions of clockworks and insurgents from the nearby Clicking Caverns and Darklands. Thanks to its draconic parentage and Tiandan patriotism, Shahui remains a magical and martial powerhouse. Nearby Minata, despite its storied Taumatan heritage and technical prowess in shipbuilding and wayfinding, tends to be overlooked by outsiders as a haven for pirates and raiders, a reputation that similarly discourages intrusion. Indeed, the Wandering Isles' harsh monsoons, typhoons, alongside Tianjing maritime prowess, have proven enough to turn would-be conquerors into bloodied flotsam and headless jetsam. The constant murmurs of Mount Shibotai, the most terrifying of Tianxia's volcanoes, also presents an exceedingly effectual deterrent in dissuading long-term expansions. To many in the heartland feudal empires, these diverse regions have generally been perceived as distractions from more important concerns of dynastic continuity. This approach persists among the three self-styled true scions of Lunghua: military juggernaut Ling Shen, prophecy-proclaiming Po Li, and heroism-exalting Quain. Most of these nations still cling to the ideals of bygone imperial glory, each believing their unique strengths qualify them for the mandate of heaven. Some dream of restoring your founding empires to unite Tianxia, and pay scant consideration as to whether the rest of the continent desires it. These more belligerent states steep deeper into the ferment of war while claiming to do so for the sake of peace. Other successor states are wary of hegemonic claims, equally if they suffered from imperial abuse or exist at cross purposes with these scions' ambitions. The Republic of Bakwan, with its history of being exploited by Lunghua, has no patience for empires old or new. It seeks to establish its own existence with a suppressed pre-imperial heritage alongside the cultures of the Tapestry people, the new residents from the Ruby Phoenix Tapestry demiplane. Quanlai, home to many Tengu communities, was treated as a Lunghua dumping ground and penal colony, taxed in silver and labor, and received little development or support for its overcrowded population. While imperial courts traditionally treated Songbai with perfunctory cordiality on account of it being the empire's rice basket, Lunghua's disintegration led to Ling Shen's immediate iron-fisted campaigns to seize Songbai's fields and subjugate their farmers. Perhaps Cao Ling is most stridently opposed to the ambitions of so-called true scions, as this hobgoblin polity was carved out from corpses of no less than 6 conquered successor states. Some successor states are reclaiming their post-imperial identities from Lingua's brutal collapse. Tangmai, Goka, Huangat, and Linvare, each retaining its unique cultural and economic independence with bygone Lingua, have stepped on different paths to determine their destinies. Tang Mai's confederations of sorceress gentry pursue their own means of nation building. Meanwhile, Goka, with its near monopoly on Tian Xia's western sea trade, conducts business as usual to grow networks of mercantile soft power. But this time, all the money remains in Gokan banks, not tributed to some distant coffer. Huangat, the Kingdom of Flowers, possesses undisputed mastery of aesthetics and diplomatic influence, sharing its rich traditions of material and intangible culture to engage Tianxia in new futures of amity and shared destiny. The multicultural nation of Linvar has come a long way from its historical roots as the Taodan colony of Amamander and grown into its own land that values tolerance, syncretism, and independence. Some successor states present metaphysical challenges to imperial ambition. There are lands haunted by ghosts, fiends, and stranger otherworldly entities. It's doubtful Shenmen's cruel spider women and undead Lingua bureaucrats will entertain any aspirant's claims to sovereignty. Any expedition foolish enough to foray into their lands will find itself bleached of blood and spirit. Raindamp Wanshao also spells doom for any claimants. The mysterious Savior God who has uplifted the waterlogged land from poverty swiftly punishes those who dare pose as rivals to their power. The Oni shogunate of Chuye similarly doesn't suffer any attempt to intrude upon its territories if any pompous unifiers dare show themselves in this once pastoral land. The ferocious warriors are ready with blades, claws, and teeth in anticipation of the feast to come. While the perils of these lands are present and clear for all to see, Tianjing's hazards can easily be overlooked. This idyllic land of celestial touched exorcists and bell ringing temples might appear harmless and benign, but all know of the stories of ancient Klipoth sealed and slumbering beyond Tianjing's placid earth. Lastly, some polities have never fallen under direct Lingua rule, by dint of being settled in areas too obscure, remote, or uninhabitable. The elf forest nation of Jinan, shielded from others by stealth and spellcraft, pursued a policy of relative autarky, thus largely avoiding most of the tumults of Longua's rise and fall. Similarly, the Athamaru ruled underwater realm of Zidao proved impractical for imperial conquest and became a valued trading partner for its ready supply of pearls, coral, and other pelagic wonders. Despite the plentiful jade within its mountains, the Samsaran domain of Ziha ended up too harsh and inconvenient for Lingua colonists. Instead, a tributary relationship of trade and cultural exchange emerged. The prevalence of imperial Lingua's religious taboos prescribing the shedding of Samsaran's sainted immortal blood might also have led to such a peaceful coexistence, but it remains to be seen if such beliefs would similarly stay the true scions grasping hands. Um, at first level, when you create your character, you gain a background of your choice. Can't change at later levels. So I don't see much to interest me here. At a first glance, um, maybe acupuncturist is the only one on this page that would fit in that the town we're looking at. You study Qi and its abilities to heal the body through assessment and regulating Qi flow. Now occult techniques that originally in Shuye before its masters were driven away when Oni took over. You might have encountered a master willing to teach an eager student or felt the relief of its practice on your own body, taking your interest to greater heights. Choose two attribute boosts, one to be wisdom or dexterity, and the other is a free attribute boost. You're trained in medicine and acupuncture lore. You gain the battle medicine skill trait. Jeweler might be a thing, but at least going off the description of the town, it's not that prosperous. And most of the trade is lumber based although there were some shops catering to the nobles staying in the town, but those have, for the most part, fallen on hard times where we're picking up the story. So I don't really see that being a background that makes sense. Silk farmer, maybe. Studied and mastered the art of sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms to produce silk, is an important industry that requires an immense amount of study and care. There wasn't any like silk farming mentioned in the town, and if that was present, you would think that would be an important industry that the town would cultivate. Perhaps street food vendor. Or the tiffin box deliverer. Those are sort of, I think, trades that or backgrounds that you could do anywhere. And traveling gourmand, it's a bit difficult since, from what I understand, we're supposed to be considering having lived our entire lives in that town. Rare backgrounds we won't look at, since we're also not supposed to be doing anything rare. Magic and the spirit world. The mortal world and the spirit world in Tian Xia are separate yet integrated, different but alike in equal measures. Each influences the other. To ignore one in favor of another invites danger and disaster. Those who strictly categorize the mortal world as civilized and obsessed with order, and the spirit world as wild and ridden with chaos can easily lose their way or become oblivious to the problems and potential of either world. Ask a dozen scholars what the spirit world entails, and one gets 24 informed opinions. One might categorize the mortal world as flesh and blood and the spirit world as all other things under heaven. But there are incarnate spirits and spirits who are obsessed with blood and flesh. One might call the mortal world all that has been born, but spirits can be born from the stone, river, trees, and even buildings. Another might call mortals those with a balance of the elements, but there are mortals who lack one or have too many of another, and spirits that embody all five. Yet another scholar might call the mortal world the familiar, the spirit world strange, but a spirit would describe the mortal world as equally strange. If our family and ancestors can become ghosts, are they no longer human and now only spirit? Think of the spirit world as a river and the mortal world as air. Wind can affect the movement of water, and the movement of water can affect the air nearby. Without water, the air becomes dry. Without air, the water would exist in a void. Some beings live purely in water, while others live purely in air, but it's also possible for one to step through air into water if one knows where to look. Like reflections in the water, the spirit world can be seen as the extreme mirror of the mortal world in terms of emotion and thought. A grudge can be made manifest and last for centuries in the spirit world. Love can turn into a physical feature of the land. Often, what mortals find frightening in the spirit world is a manifestation of their fears and vices reflected back on them. Those pure of heart and soul feel no fear, perhaps finding beauty in the spirits instead. Scholars also agree that the spirit world tends to intersect with the extreme edges of the mortal world. A bloody battlefield quickly becomes haunted. An overgrown forest shrouded in mist and completely cut off from mortals can awaken on its own. Concentrating magical power into a space might push it into the spirit world. Changes also happen in the other direction. Cleansing a battlefield, returning it to a place of life with trees and wildflowers lets the haunted dead sleep. A blessed saint can bring the beatific aspect of the spirit world to them, while a malicious, greedy scholar sitting upon piles of gold and silver can summon an avaricious spirit. In this way, the spirit world and the mortal world influence each other. Shrine erected at a crossroad to leave offerings can keep the local spirit fed and happy, and reciprocate by protecting travelers who take that path. Sometimes the awakening of a spirit might come about from pure belief. A thing awakes to its spirit form when it begins to relate to its environment like a mortal would. Things, even inanimate objects, have a kind of memory and sense of their surroundings because it sleeps. A thing doesn't really react to mortal life. Waking then means the desire to engage with the mortal world, such as a teacup suddenly rousing and running away from bad tea. Consequently, a spirit can also go back to sleep. The older spirits, such as mountains, forests, rivers, sleep often, only waking when angered or disturbed, and thus causing earthquakes, fires, and floods. Convincing them to sleep again might require a large sacrifice. Small things can wake up in similar ways, though due to their own size and influence, they mostly cause harmless distractions, and a small offering usually appeases them. Further blending the line between worlds, mortals join the spirit world after death as ancestral spirits, ghosts, or the hungry and forgotten dead. This is why people must treat their dead ancestors well, for these spirits can linger, perhaps even take an active part in day-to-day life. If treated poorly, the hungry dead might haunt a family or leave altogether. Becoming the forgotten dead. Ancestors' Day serves as an annual reminder. For communities to not only clean the graves and leave an offering to make sure the ancestors are satiated, but also leave something for those forgotten dead and offer incense or food to Fumeyoshi as well. This gesture is both practical and a mercy. Communities don't want the hungry dead haunting them and causing misfortune. A mortal, however, doesn't have to die to become a spirit. They can embody the purity of an aspect so strongly that they transform into a spirit. How does this change differ from ascending or becoming immortal? Well, becoming a spirit is a kind of immortality. Ascending to heaven turns the mortal into more of themselves, with their thoughts, feelings, and identity amplified. A mortal being becoming a spirit turns into that singular aspect. For example, the butterfly lovers aren't butterflies nor deities of love, but a symbol and manifestation of love itself. Love becomes their sole concern and nothing else. When spirits become mortal, such as the Great Flood, then the spirit takes on the nuances, differences, and contradictions of mortality. They might express love, but they now have other emotions: fear, hatred, happiness, jealousy. hope, and so on, as well as thought and the ability to change their minds and emotions to something else. Spirits have modeled mortal behavior, such as founding cities in the spirit world, sometimes in isolated places like the Forest of Spirits, the Sea of Ghosts, Quan Lai, Wan Shou, or Chu Ye, especially if they wish to escape mortal influence. In other cases, spirit found cities within mortal cities, a reflection that can be crossed over in one direction or both ways. When mortals say a city feels more crowded than it should, they felt the presence of a spirit city. Spirits of the city go about their business much as mortals do. They work, trade, buy things, farm food, assemble buildings. They play games, they argue and create communities. The difference is what they value. While some spirits understand mortal money, most value stories, art, emotion, magic, music, entertainment, and novelty. Spirits have invited artists to their cities by surreptitiously opening portals and luring, scaring, or pushing such mortals through. As long as the artist keeps their head straight, performs as asked, and accepts payment, most return to the mortal world unscathed. Most. Magic and Tian Xia. The theories and practice of magic is as varied as syncretic as its philosophies and religions. Some practitioners simply view magic as deep, specialized knowledge. In fact, any expertise can resemble magic. The blacksmith who forges metal, both flexible and resilient, might seemingly have magical powers, especially if that metal lasts for ages or withstands even divine powers. The butcher's trade might be deemed mystical when their knife never dulls because they can cut a perfect seam in between the grain of meat. A physician who can bring the terminally ill back from the edge of death might be viewed as a magician, as in the case of Qi Zhong, god of medicine and magic. Someone who achieves mastery of a skill therefore can give the impression of having divine and magical powers, and in fact a practitioner might actually ascend because of that mastery. For some, magic involves tapping into bits and pieces of leftover divinity, which has relevance to the knowledge theory. After all, knowing and understanding these bits of divinity still require learning and insight. Immortals in heaven can manipulate the stuff of chaos to make impossible things. Mortals can do similar feats, but under the constraints of mortal existence. Many arts in Tian Xia seek to tap into the inherent divinity of the world, either externally or internally. Sages seek mystic power via precise control over the self. Alchemical arts seek to purify the body of the impurities of age and death through ingested tinctures or a carefully controlled diet. Magicians and imperial ministers call on minor spirits to do their bidding, or find magic in divine charts, chants, and auras. Some seek the direct favor of the celestial court, performing acts of awe-inspiring piety in hopes of pleasing heaven and receiving gifts from gods in return. Others understand magic as an adjustment of the amount of one or more particular elements within a person, place, or thing, per Qi Zhang's teaching. Each element is associated with a color, fluid, or material in a vessel, astrological positioning, and temperament. Each element affects others in a chain cycle. So a magician must carefully adjust each one to achieve the proper equilibrium. Such adherence can literally add the needed element to the thing, feed a patient related food, add a symbolic detail to attract a deity's blessing for that element. Lastly, magic can be seen as the ability to manipulate the energy of a physical entity, both within and without. The energy that flows throughout the world, can be manipulated, collected, and expelled from a body, place, or thing. Too much expulsion drains a body or vessel. Too much pulling turns the Qi sluggish and difficult to manipulate. The use of Qi isn't about leaving something half empty or half full, or in some kind of perfect, unchanging equilibrium, because that leads to stagnation. Instead, the key to mastery is knowing when to expel or pull Qi, letting a thing breathe, like a mortal does. A practitioner utilizes knowledge of feng shui, manipulating the body, utilizing pressure points, prescribing certain foods, applying cold treatments and cold presses, and physical exercise to change the flow of Qi. For objects in physical spaces, Qi manipulation requires the placement of plants and trees, rocks and walls, and even people to slowly pull or rapidly expel energy. The average person treats someone who uses magic like any other expert in their field. Thus, practitioners are as admired, feared, loathed, and loved as anyone, with incredible skill. Some value expertise and others feel threatened by it. A scholar can equally be impressed by a magician as they are jealous of a magical knowledge. A farmer can be equally excited to find a magician capable of helping them through a period of drought as they can be fearful of magical power or angered at not receiving more potent aid. A sovereign might invite a magician to their court to serve like any scholar or advisor, or they could consider such a figure as an ambitious threat. Filling their bureaucracy instead with ignorant sycophants, like any who wield a sought-after skill, or who command great power. Magicians can find both positive and negative attention in equal measure. People thus tend to judge magicians by their ethical and moral actions more than by their magic. Or perhaps magicians receive even more scrutiny because of their magic. After all, the average person can't split a mountain, and their mistakes can't break a village. Lest a magician fall into the trap of hubris, they should keep in mind that their power can affect the spirit world just as potently. They might not care about the village they just destroyed, but the awakened spirits of that land might rise up to eliminate such a threat, regardless of intentions. When a magician's power threatens heaven itself, the deities might strike down the offending individual for their hubris. How a magician crosses that line varies by context, the temperament of the deity taking responsibility for the transgression and attitude of said magician. Yamatsumi might ignore someone invoking a volcano, even if the eruption takes out a significant part of the countryside because the Mountain Lord sees occasional volcanic destruction as desirable. Should that magician demand dominion over volcanoes or continue, however, Yamatsumi might intervene. A favorite trick of Shizuru's court, especially by Ye Xing, is to ascend a disruptive magician to celestial status, letting them fall into the trap of pride, thinking themselves recognized for their power, only for Ye Xing to immediately punish them since they now fall under his purview. Hei Fang and the dragons find this trick hilarious, causing thunderstorms in the mortal world as a result. Magicians who become too powerful risk controlling gods themselves, and any who reaches those vaulted levels will find themselves confronting the celestial court sooner rather than later. The dangers of magic present many reasons why some magicians aim for the practice of cultivation first. Due to the rigor necessary to achieve such states, people might find magicians cold and distant, not realizing the cosmic consequences and side effects of their power. Magicians who want to effect change in the mortal world often use intermediaries. For political change, they advise monarchs. Those who want to change the land might itself teach others how to work their environments or engineer what they need. And those who need to fight an evil will recruit heroes from the Jianghu world of martial arts. The elements. According to Tian legend, the scholar god Qi Zhong was first to understand the nature of the elemental cycle, and it was he who introduced the people of Tian Xia to the power of the five elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Blessed with the rare gift of elemental sight, even before his rise to divinity, Qi Zhong saw the rare elemental energies of existence in their purest forms. From his transmitted teachings came the first understanding of the elements, an understanding that would shape Tian culture and tradition for centuries to come. Notably, the Tian elemental system includes the elements of metal and wood. These two elemental planes were largely cut off from the rest of their neighbors for millennia, their importance neglected by much of Galarian. Some speculate that this philosophical belief in the importance of these elements as well as their eventual rebalancing is what allowed Tianxia's elementalists to retain a connection. With the re-emergence of the plane in wood and metal, the practice of the elements is beginning to spread through Galarian as a whole. Once more, the Tian physicians, philosophers, and magicians remain among the best trained to read and manipulate these energies. The elemental cycle. Tianxia elementalists believe that the power of elemental magic is derived not from the elements but from the ceaseless cycle and endless cosmic process of generation and destruction that takes place between the elemental planes of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Key to this cycle is balance. While imbalances might arise, they're temporary. The natural equilibrium of the five elements will rebalance itself over time, as each of these elements are simply key phases in an ever-changing cycle. Some elementalists prefer to call them as the five stages to emphasize their nature as agents of transition and change. In this framework, two elemental cycles turn in counterpoint, one of growth and one of restraint. In the former, wood feeds Fire. Fire feeds earth. Earth feeds metal. Metal feeds water. And water feeds wood. On the other hand, wood restrains earth. Earth restrains water. Water restrains fire. Fire restrains metal. And metal restrains wood. These cycles are seen as natural processes, forces of nature, balancing and counterbalancing one another into eternity. As the foundation of early Tian cosmology, the elements served as a framework through which all natural processes were viewed. Many pastoral societies categorize different seasons by their corresponding element. Spring was referred to as the season of wood, summer, the season of fire. Each year is also an element, and elements under which an individual was born are traditionally said to influence one's personality. For example, those born during an earth year might be stereotyped as gentle and steadfast. Unsurprising, Tian elementalists pay close attention to these associations, hiring geomancers, doctors, diviners, and martial artists to best empower the elements of their choosing. Medicine, emotions, natural landmarks, and constructed monuments can all affect the elemental association of a landscape, and many Tian cities are carefully built with these philosophies in mind. Elemental practitioners often attempt to live in ways associated with their connection to the elements. Kineticists of water sometimes blindfold themselves to enhance their hearing. Meanwhile, those who magically manipulate metal are often sought out for beauty tips and moisturizing cream as the element is associated with the skin. The elemental cycle has been historically projected onto the process of dynastic tradition, a practice originating in the Shu Empire that has lasted into the present. Rulers would become associated with an element depending on significant events that occur during their reign. For example, an empire who leads their nation through a period of economic decline might be associated with the element of metal. As the element of metal feeds into the element of water, the ideal next ruler should be one reminiscent of water. Potential successors to the throne would leverage that expectation to their advantage. A summary of the 5 Tian elements and their associated traits as follows. Metal, associated with the season of autumn, color white. In the harvest cycle, it's connected to the harvest season as well, as with the subsequent withering of unharvested crops. The element of metal is one of restraint as well as one of decay or aging. The strength of steel on one hand is the inevitable rust of iron on the other. Those born under the element of metal are thought to be steadfast and organized, but also unbending, rigid. Wood, spring and green. In the harvest cycle, it's connected to the season of budding growth and young stalks reaching toward the sun. The element of wood is of action and expansion, life and purification. Those born under the element of wood are thought to be sociable and adventurous, but also capricious and short-tempered. Water is traditionally associated with the season of winter and black. In the harvest cycle, it's connected to the period of stillness after harvest when farmers wait for the cold of winter to pass while conserving energy and resources for next season's planting. The element of water is one that calms and soothes, washing away impurities and ailments. Those born under the element of water are thought to be gentle and wise, but indecisive and unassertive. Fire is traditionally associated with the season of summer and the color red. In the harvest cycle, it's connected to the period of flourishing and flowering when nature is in full bloom and crops have grown to maturity. The element of fire is one that both warms and burns. It's dynamic, it is dangerous. Those born under the element of fire are thought to be friendly and passionate, but also headstrong and vindictive. Earth, associated with the color yellow and transition between each of the 4 seasons. I was wondering how they're going to work the 5th one in. I feel that's a bit of a cheat, but okay. The central axle upon which the wheel of the year turns. In the harvest cycle, it's connected to the planting of new seeds and planning that comes with the transition between crop cycles. The element of earth is one that sustains and stabilizes, centers and unifies. Those born under the element of earth are thought to be practical and patient, but also stubborn and prone to overthinking. The five-element cycle forms the main understanding, but many variations of the cycle have appeared in different regions. The plane of air, known to Tian scholars but not typically included, is considered by many to consist of pure qi, cementing an association between breath and vital energy. The Silk Virtues sect of herbalists dedicated to Qi Zhong instead combined the elements of wood and air. The syncretic element of wood is considered to be the vital essence of plants and trees rather than a physical substance. Certain regions of the continent have developed their own elemental system. In Minkai, elementalists see the elements as a natural analog to one's body and mind. As the bodies and minds of living creatures can be mapped onto the four base physical elements of earth, fire, water, and air. Element-based medicine is relatively common in Minkai. Healers envision ailments as an imbalance of the body. Vital elements then tailor remedies accordingly. Under this philosophy, the elements exist in a hierarchy as importance as follows. I think this will be the last section we read tonight. I think that'll put me on course if or actually let me check. Well, I'm going to skip most of the peoples and character options, so I think that'll put me on track for finishing this tomorrow night. Even though this is pretty early in the book, still, because I'm only going to really look at the options that are relevant to what we're pursuing here. Dragon Champions of the Zodiac. Fortunes and fates of dragon empires are laid here to those who can interpret the stars and their constellations. These stars guide all who dwell beneath the light, gifting mortals with the strength of the zodiac guardians. The Tian people widely use the Dragon Empire zodiac to mark the progression of years, months and hours within one of its 12 constellations, though each nation can have a variation of the zodiac. In its relation to their calendar and fortune, the Oracular Council of Poli uses the zodiac to craft official state policies considered sacred by the Polian populace. In Ziha, calendars are marked and guided by the zodiac, and at the moon of the Sky Dragon, brave adventurers trek the Mount Tsukio. The origins of the Dragon Empire Zodiac trace back to whispered folk legends of the dragon champions of the Zodiac and their founder Tian Xia, who championed the 12 impossible trials of the Zodiac. The members of the clandestine Society of the Dragon Champions of the Zodiac serve as incubators and protectors of Tian Xia's greatest treasures, each belonging to a mighty grand house of the Zodiac, and drawing their powers from their constellations. The Underworld Dragon. Legends say Tian Xia went to Nagajor and was tasked to remove a many-headed serpent. The creature terrorized Nagajor by boiling and poisoning rivers, creating toxic wastewater, and polluting the region. Every time a head was cut off the serpent, another would grow back. Uh, Geysers, various part of Tian Xia. His wives all pointed to the serpent's body, marred with fresh, fearsome battle scars, seemingly caused by a larger beast. Following the sage wife's advice, Tian Shan leapt onto the serpent heads, playing an enchanting melody on a flute while dancing to soothe the serpent. He promised to defeat the larger beast terrorizing the many-headed serpent, and in turn it agreed to leave the land alone. Those born under this constellation, also known as the Guardian, might be tenacious and foresighted, but also secretive, brooding, and cold. The Swordswoman. Next, Tian Shen traveled to Songbai and was ordered to sow 100 wheat fields in one day to feed a village suffering from famine. Passing merchant swordswoman offered 500 unbreakable swords in exchange for providing her bread for 1 year. Tian Shen heartily agreed and thanked the swordswoman for her generosity. Then, with great ingenuity and marvelous speed, he wrote 500 swords to 100 imperial dragons, poking holes in bag with seeds and attaching one to each dragon's tail. As imperial dragons flew over the fields, the swords cut great furrows into the earth, while the bags filled those furrows with seeds. The fields successfully sowed, the village prospered. Those born under this constellation, also known as the warrior, might be resolute, daring, and charismatic, but also known to be foolhardy, hot-tempered, opportunistic. I don't know, opportunistic doesn't, to me, really seem like it fits in. Tian Shen then traveled to Shidao and was tasked to stop an invasion stemming from the vast depths of Ayamaru, a great dangerous chasm spawning millions of monsters. Tian Shen's legendary might and the aid of some powerful Shidaoan heroes, they thwarted the fearsome critters, where the fighting was so fierce. Actually, I don't think I'm gonna read the rest of those. I don't know. I'm pretty sure a lot of those come really close to, maybe a bit too close to real world myths. I don't know. To me, that's kind of. I'm not sure. I've got mixed feelings because they went out of their way to like not just grab stuff from one culture here, but to me, it almost feels just like a bastardization of a bunch of different stuff. So I'm not sure what approach I would have preferred there. Um, I guess that those few entries kind of give you a feel for these sort of zodiac entries. Um, so yeah, we will pick back up with peoples. Um, and I'm only going to read the entries of the uh, ones that are commonly going to be featured in the specific region we're looking at. So even though it does look like we have quite a ways to go, it should go quickly tomorrow. Tomorrow also um, will be, well, I'm going to try again what we attempted to do earlier today, since that didn't turn out that well, and we have two more decks to look at.